All right, it's been way too long since I've done a good old-fashioned Ableton tutorial, so I figured I would revisit one of my favorite ones, which is how to do some generative chord kind of stuff using the built-in MIDI racks or MIDI effects. So what I'm going to do is use the good old chord effect and the Arpeggiator effect and maybe some other ones as well. So you find the MIDI effects there in your MIDI category. You see we have Arpeggiator, chord, note length, pitch, random, scale, and velocity. And down here, I have this MIDI effect rack already set up. But maybe I'll try to create it from scratch for you. All right. Well, no, I'm not going to create it from scratch. All right. So if I play a note on my MIDI keyboard, right now it's just playing straight through. It's kind of boring. All right, so why is it playing straight through? If I look here at the chain, right now the chain is using just that third chain there is playing. So we'll call that that one's passed through. Okay. Now the one above it here, actually, if I select that and we see the devices, you'll see it has a shift up an octave, and it also has a velocity compressor over here. That's just to kind of boost the velocity a little bit, even things out. So let's see. Right now it's just playing the pass through. Go over here, rename this one octave up. So using the chain command, or excuse me, the chain, and that's mapped to a MIDI controller, so I can just go up and down there. That takes the MIDI input and just shifts it up and down an octave, or just up an octave, or keeps it the same. Why is that important? Okay, now what I want to look at here is specifically making chords, but then supplying some way to have some different inversions. Now what an inversion is normally you have a chord in the root position, which is basically the root chord is the lowest note. Now we can invert the chord and basically make the root the highest note and kind of expose the kind of the middle, the tonality from there. Kind of makes for some interesting variations using the same chord. So the question is, how do I create the chord? Now, if I come up here, I'm going to call this part the chord middle. And so that's going to be the third and the fifth of the chord. So if I click over here, let's look at the MIDI devices that are over here. Now, with a chord device, normally it assumes you want to play the root. And in this case, I don't want to play the root. I just want this to be the third and the fifth. So in order to do that, I have to basically shift the note up. I'll do this. Let's play this through here. Okay. Now, normally, the note would be... Let's see. Shift this down. So now I'm playing a third. That's the normal pass through. And then the third. And then to get the fifth, I use this chord device over here. Okay. So that's the chord in the root position. And then I use that chain to decide, am I playing the bottom note, or does the bottom note get shifted up? So the chain decides which of the effects, either a pass through or a shift up an octave. It's pretty easy. So you have this middle, the octave up, the pass through. So I'm just playing the same note but I get those two inversions, or the root and an inversion. Now, the bottom one is not, it has nothing to really do with the chord, but it's something I added to kind of create a little bass line. Okay, now how I did that is this, we'll call this, like I said, bass line. It's kind of just bouncing in octaves there. So let's come over and look at this. So MIDI note comes in, gets shifted down by an octave, and then I've got two more chains over here, and each one of those is an arpeggiator. So this is a straight arpeggiator that just basically goes up and down 12 steps. I could have it go down and back, or I like the typical up an octave. And it repeats infinitely. I could do some things like this. Okay, so that gives it that bounce. And it's playing at an eighth note rate. Now the other arpeggiator that's here, I have it playing at a triplet rate. Which by itself doesn't sound too interesting. But if I play the two together, kind of gives that little twist in there every so often there. That one's kind of cool too. So I have one of the arpeggiators running up and down an octave at the quarter note rate and the other one at an eighth note rate. So it kind of creates this kind of interesting little polyrhythm, sort of. Not really a polyrhythm, but... Now if I wanted to really crank up one of these... Now, but maybe I don't want it to happen all the time, so I'm going to change repeats to maybe like 4. I'm going to leave it at infinite. Leave it at eighth for now. All right. So I got those two things going on. Let's see how they sound together. So that's all just from a single note now. Right. So if I wanted to, I could actually just create a simple MIDI clip in there. I think no, I don't want that one. That's too complicated. That one. Just a note, just a single note. Okay, let me mess with an envelope here. And let's see. I guess I'm going to do this. Actually, let me turn that off for a second. And I'm going to make this 2 separate notes. Now, come back over here, my chain selector for that one. And let's, the second measure. So if it's going up and down, basically playing the root and then that inversion there. All right, so that's neat, but if you've seen the other one, you know I'd like to make it even crazier. So what I have that doing, I then want to play that into a more straight up MIDI effect rack that has another kind of arpeggiator in there. Let me turn that on. Now normally this also has a pass through, so if I just hit play, it plays just normal. But then there's also this arpeggiator here, which is actually in the MIDI effects rack. If you come over here, MIDI effects, MIDI effect rack, arpeggio, you'll see ARP up. That's what I grabbed and put here. And that basically creates these kind of really octave, like a bunch of flourishes and thing on top of things. So let's play them together here. What happened here? Okay, turn it on. So I'll play my, maybe I'll try to play some drums here on top of this. So that's, I guess about 12 minutes or so. But that's another example of really using the MIDI effects rack and kind of glomming, whatever, different MIDI effects on top of each other, using arpeggiators in ways that are just not quite your normal ones, really just using the repeat notes. You can also do them to just like, hold, you can even like repeat chords, that kind of stuff, and create these rhythms with arpeggiators. Arpeggiators don't have to just be the typical, you can actually use them to do some interesting rhythmic things. So hopefully they gave you a couple of ideas. I'm going to revisit the whole how to do generative music inside of the normal Ableton stuff without resorting to Max for Live, and hope you enjoyed this one and maybe it gave you some ideas. So until next time, this is Eraser Mice on Learn Max.